Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stacy Schutler, and I just want to welcome you to Catalyst 2021. I'm the president of LBMC Technologies, and I'm going to be the moderator for today's session. We try to be clever in keeping with the Catalyst theme of Top Gun. We've titled our session Need for Speed, and we recognize we have a heavily weighted audience of financial executives. And for today's session, we really want to talk about the importance of increased automation for financial transformation, and just delve into that a little bit deeper as it relates to many of you in our audience today. One thing I do want to point out, unfortunately, we are in a virtual mode again this year. We really look forward to getting back and being able to do this live. But knowing that many of you are very interested in CPE credits, we will be asking you several polling questions. You are required to answer at least 3 of the 4 questions in order to earn your CPE credit. So please make sure you do that, and you'll see the purple polling icon on your screen. So what I want to do before we get started is just let our panelists introduce themselves. I have truly the pleasure, and I'm humbled to work with these 3 individuals on our call today. So Kenneth, I'm going to start with you, and if you will, just take a few minutes to say hello and just give a brief overview of what you do here at LBMC Technologies for us.
Thanks, Stacy. Appreciate it. I have been with LBMC for about 19 years, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. I have, at the moment, responsible for one of our cloud-based financial solutions called Sage Intacct. I'm also responsible for another practice that we have with Microsoft Dynamics 365 CRM, which includes support for business functions in the areas of marketing, sales, customer service, field service, and project service automation.
So Kenneth's going to share some more insight a little bit later, but Mike, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm responsible for our intelligent automation practice, which is focused on automated workflows, RPA that we'll talk about a good bit today, and low code, no code application development.
Okay, and Mike, you just got the first ding. You use the first acronym, so.
All right,
I'll put Andrew, maybe last, but obviously not least, just go ahead and tell the audience what you do for us here.
Yeah, thanks. I'm Andrew Hayes. I manage the software development practice here. I've been here about 16 years now, and my group is responsible for building a variety of things, usually custom applications, but also integrations between systems, which is something we're going to key in on today. So we do a variety of things, but primarily for our purpose today, we're talking about integrating systems and how we can tie together things that you might purchase off the shelf with maybe some proprietary in-house solutions as well.
Great, thanks, Andrew. I know we're virtual again, but we do want this to be as interactive as it can be. So please feel free to use the chat windows, and if you have any questions throughout the presentation, Gloria we'll keep track of that and tee those up to us. And also, if we do run out of time this afternoon, please know that we will make a point to address those questions and get back to you individually. But just to get things started off and to find out, to give the 4 of us a better sense of where you all are on your digital transformation journeys, we're going to go ahead and throw up our first polling question. So you should be seeing that on your screen. And you can review that question. Again, we're just trying to get a sense for where you are, your organizations are on this journey. And I guess that's a really good time to really talk about what digital transformation means. It's a term that we've been using in our industry quite a bit, but the purpose and the goal for our session today is really to give you more detail around that and insight into what that means, and then also share a lot of examples and some stories, case studies, if you will, of how a lot of your peers are realizing big efficiency gains by deploying some of these automated solutions that we'll be talking about. So we see it a lot in finance teams, and then also just throughout many organizations. So I'll just kick us off, and I really want to start with explaining and maybe even demystifying this term that we do use a lot called digital transformation. I personally like Wikipedia's really concise definition. And per Wikipedia, digital transformation, and just for the record and throw out another acronym, you might see that referred to in print or blogs or things like that as DX. So that's referring to digital transformation. And truly, it's just the adoption of digital technology by a company for the common purposes of improving efficiencies, value, or innovation. So if you really think about that, it's really just using hardware and software to improve the operational efficiencies within your organizations or your finance departments, which in turn should lead to better financial performance or perhaps competitive advantages. And then most definitely better experiences for not only your clients, but also for your employees. And as we're all faced with this very unique war on talent and just this very interesting time we are in our history of people working remotely and people moving around, I think, employee satisfaction is quite frankly just as every bit as important as, satisfying and providing great service to our customers. So you might not think about deploying technology as a way to attract and retain great team members, but we're seeing that more and more as a top priority for many of our clients. I'll share something, and then we'll kick it off with some questions. But I was at a professional organization meeting this Tuesday, and it's a group of CEOs and a colleague of mine who owns about a $10 million business. We were just chatting. He was asking me what I was going to be doing this week, and I told him we had this session going on with close to 500 people in attendance. And he's like, "Oh, I don't need to sign up. I'm a $10 million company, digital transformation. That really doesn't pertain to me. I'm too small." And it really got me thinking about how often we just ignore things if we don't think they apply to us. And I know my team accuses me of getting on my platform, but I get very excited about talking about digital transformation, specifically as it relates to the solutions that are becoming available and being introduced to small and mid-sized businesses. So that's something we really want to focus on today. And I would actually argue that many enterprise level organizations have been on this journey and strategy for technology and innovation a lot longer than many of us with smaller businesses. So I think now is the absolute perfect time and perfect storm to be introducing and explaining this topic a little bit better. So I'm going to take a look here at our polling. So it's interesting. So about 22% of you are saying you're still extremely manual with a lot of redundant data entry. 30% of the audience has said they've digitized some documentation, but that operations still feel manually intensive. 42 are integrating systems and automating processes. So that's good, a little less than half of the audience. And 6 of you are rock stars. You're fully automated and you're loving that. So perhaps we'll, at another date, have the 6% of you that make up that group be part of a panel. So with that, Kenneth, I guess I'll go to you first. And as I mentioned, and I know some of you make fun of me, but that's okay, I can handle it. I'm really passionate and get very excited when we're talking to our clients about how these solutions are very well positioned for smaller and mid-sized organizations. So can you share a little bit about what you're seeing in the lines of business that you're responsible for in terms of how these enterprise solutions are evolving for those of us in smaller companies? And you're on mute, Kenneth.
Yeah, I can definitely speak to that. Having been in the technology business now for about 35 years, I've seen a lot of evolution. Some stories you probably don't want to hear or bore you with, but
yeah, we only have a 15-minute session. So.
Exactly. But in the last 10 years, it hasn't been so much of an evolution as it has been a revolution. In fact, most people call the digital transformation, technologies, the next industrial revolution. And that really is true. And especially with the pandemic, the last year or 2 years, it's gone on turbo drive. I mean, it's just turbocharged at this point. So I do want to talk a little bit more about digital transformation, kind of break that down a little bit. So generally speaking, when we talk about digital transformation, we're talking about 3 categories of technologies. First is cloud computing. The second is what we would call big data. And the third would be systems of intelligence. And so we'll kind of dig into each of those a little bit. So cloud computing, what is it? Why does it matter? Cloud computing has certainly had the largest and most significant impact in the technology industry in the last 10 years. That's no question about that. In the simplest terms, cloud computing means storing and accessing data over the internet. Instead of storing that data and those systems on your computer's hard drive or on a server down the hall or wherever that server might be. And so that's obviously important. We recognize this in our day-to-day personal lives because anything we use on the internet, such as Amazon or any of our music streaming services or things like that, would be considered a cloud-based solution. We're not going to get into what I would call hybrid cloud today. I know y'all have seen commercials from IBM about the hybrid cloud and probably wondering what that is. We won't have time to kind of drill into that. But for true cloud computing, what that means to us in the industry are systems that would be considered multi-tenant. And then that's kind of a technical term. But basically what that means is there's a single instance of software that's serving multiple customers. And each customer is called a tenant. So again, going back to our personal example there, any of those solutions we use on the internet today would be considered multi-tenant solutions because many customers are using a single instance of that software. So then the question is, well, why is that important? So what's significant about that? Number one, what's significant about that is that as a company, you no longer have to invest in on-premise hardware and software and all the overhead costs associated with having your own data center, basically. What we found over the years is that many companies were so focused on building up their data infrastructure and their systems and their data center type resources, they weren't able to focus or spend the resources they needed to on their core business functions and the value they bring to their own individual markets. And so there's a very strong ROI, return on investment, that companies can make just simply by offloading all of that computing power that they no longer need because the software publishers are now taking care of that. And it can definitely drive right to the bottom line, both from a cost standpoint, but more importantly, where companies can now focus all their resources on their core business components. The second really component of that, why that's important, is that you no longer have these very expensive on-premise system upgrades, which have to happen every several years, perhaps, or less, or in some cases, clients haven't upgraded their software in 10 years and are still running off a 10-year-old on-premise solutions because the cost and expense involved in doing that. Those upgrades go away with cloud computing solutions because the software publishers are now responsible for that. Probably the most significant area where cloud computing has really driven change and continues to be the engine, I think, which is driving digital transformation, is really the speed in which those systems are maintained and enhanced. So for instance, in the past, a typical on-premise solution, you may not be able to upgrade that for 18 or 24 months on a typical upgrade cycle. One of our software vendors, Sage Intacct, which I'm responsible for, releases updates every quarter. And so you're able to bring change to the marketplace very quickly. Companies and clients can take advantage of that very quickly and really drive that to the bottom line of their business from an operational efficiency and effectiveness standpoint very quickly. Andrew's going to talk a little bit about integration later, but cloud-based solutions are purpose-built to be very easy to integrate, where very cost-effective to integrate, and enables us to integrate those solutions much more quickly than we could in the past. And the bottom line is that why cloud computing is important for everyone to really be accepting of is that it's not going away. Software publishers aren't really investing in their on-premise legacy solutions. They're putting all of their resources towards the cloud-based solutions. And so that is the future. And so that's kind of where obviously everything's going, and certainly something we want people to begin to take advantage of and understand the significant impacts in a positive way it can have to your business. So this may be a good time for our second poll question to respond to. So you should see that coming up on your screen just here in a moment, talking about the cloud. And while that's coming up and you're answering those questions, I'm gonna go ahead and jump into item number 2. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time talking to it, but the second kind of component of digital transformation is what's been called big data. As you can imagine, with the advent of the cloud and really all the devices and information that are connected to the cloud or to the internet, the amount of data has just grown exponentially and continues to do so. In fact, if you look at the numbers, and I actually looked this up to get an update from a couple of years ago when I looked this up, across the internet, the amount of data that supports the internet today is around 44 zettabytes. And that's zettabytes with a Z, which is, if you want to think about it, 44 trillion gigabytes. So wrap your head around that number. A lot of data. At a personal level, we understand this. We have refrigerators and TVs and thermostats that are, and in fact, I think Stacy, you gave us as an LBMC kind of thing, a promotion one time, an actual electrical plug socket that you could tie to the internet. So again, data coming from all different sources. Commercially, you have what's called the Internet of Things. That's kind of the technical term for all these devices that get connected to the internet. Commercially, you've got folks that are connecting all their machines. They're on the manufacturing floor, commercial HVAC and cooling systems, all these kind of things, pipelines, you name it. Those things are getting connected to the internet, and all that data is being accumulated. And so what we've seen is an explosion of technologies related to being able to consume that data, to analyze it, to identify anomalies, and in many cases, present information back to our customers that they don't even have to ask for. It presents it back, and you're immediately be able to take advantage of that. So some pretty significant contributions. And then lastly, the third leg of the stool, so to speak, is systems of intelligence. And if you know, this is probably the cool kid in class, is the systems of intelligence, because this is all about artificial intelligence, AI. So we see this in the movies all the time. It's certainly becoming a reality from a business standpoint in many areas. And so we've already talked briefly about some of the AI that's going on related to these data analysis engines. We see this again at a personal level. For instance, with Amazon, if I log into Amazon, I'm immediately presented with information about my previous purchases, where it begins to suggest things for me based on my preferences or things that I've ordered on a frequent basis. This is an example of actionable data coming from, or actionable results that are coming from that data that's being maintained, and the system is interpreting that and presenting that information to you. An example on from a financial systems standpoint, from our Sage Intacct practice, is what Sage Intacct calls their intelligent GL. And so what Sage Intacct has done is actually at no cost, this is included in the basic core subscription of Intacct, no additional cost. They built an AI engine that's sitting there evaluating and analyzing all the general ledger entries that are occurring within the financial solution. And as it begins to identify and learn how you're doing business, it begins to identify things that kind of fall into the pattern of how you do business, and begins to identify anomalies of things that don't appear to be correct based upon its previous experience and what it's learned from you. And what it begins to do is surface that information so you can visualize that and take action on it on a continual basis. This kind of feeds what Sage Intacct calls their continual close. In other words, you're auditing and correcting and updating your data on a continual basis. And so you're not having to do that at your month-end close and identifying those issues. This helps to shorten the close cycle. It helps to make the data more accurate and obviously results in better financial results and performance. Subsequent to that, if you think about it, really all your month-end close cycles lead up to an annual audit, where typically a CPA audit firm is going to be looking at some subset of your data, to determine if there's issues with how you're managing your financials. In this case, Sage Intacct is doing that for all your transactions at real time, every minute of the day. And so in theory, as these systems become more intelligent and able to find and correct and resolve things more broadly across these applications, it's really going to have significant impacts to how not only monthly closes occur, but also how maybe even annual audits are performed in the future.
Thanks, Kenneth. I like the way you give that financial example, because again, as you mentioned, we've come to expect this machine learning and IA from all those applications that we use personally and if you're happen to walk in your Starbucks and you get a coupon served up on your phone, that type of thing. So it's good to hear some real life examples about how that AI is being used in current day technology for small and mid-sized businesses. So I want to share, before Mike, I come to you, I want to share polls of the results of our poll, which is really interesting. So 6% of you say that you don't have any of your systems currently in the cloud, but you have plans to in the future. 43% have a few of your critical systems in the cloud. 45% of you have shifted to where most of your critical systems are in the cloud. And then 6% say you don't have any cloud-based systems yet, nor do you have any plans to move them to the cloud in the future. And some of that might be dependent upon what industries you serve or what industries you're currently in. So that's very interesting. So Mike, I called you out a little bit earlier, but it was all in jest for using, I think, the first acronym. No doubt, our industry.
It won't be the last.
Yeah, exactly. Me either. You can return the call out. But you mentioned something, RPA, or robotic process automation. And I think this is a very interesting topic of conversation. And if you will, just kind of share a little bit about what that is and debunk the myth, if you will, that that's just for really, really large organizations and only futuristic.
Yeah, I'm happy to. And I think you're right about these acronyms. We're kind of joking about it, Stacy, but I think the only thing harder than figuring out these technology acronyms is trying to figure out what my kids are texting on their phones nowadays with other. But it's very similar. But RPA just stands for robotic process automation. So, you may hear folks refer to them as things like a bot or bots, and some people have grown an entire bot farm. Really cool stuff. But I think it really just simply simulates and automates manual activities that a human does. So I kind of give a parallel example. I'll follow Kenneth's lead on things that we may be familiar with in our house, but folks have those robotic vacuums now. So the idea is they simply train it, tell it when to run, and then go do something more valuable with your time. So same thing, except on the technology side with systems and integrations, RPA really fits in there. So. And an interesting thing about this technology that I think has happened, much like some of that technology, like the vacuums, over time, costs come down and the ease of setup and configuration and training those things, even leveraging things like the cloud, as Kenneth mentioned, allows those things to have much broader adoption and implementation. People are really using these technologies, companies of all sizes now. It's really coming to a pretty interesting fit. But if I think of a couple of examples, I would bet, thinking about the folks that we're talking to today, that almost everybody has people in their organization who are manually dealing with spreadsheets, manually entering data into different systems, going out to websites to pull information down. And when you really think about it, those valuable employees, they would probably much rather to be doing something more valuable, but you would rather have them doing something more valuable. So RP allows you to automate that. And I think, I even think about us, we have relationships with a lot of vendors, and we have, we've got a customer account service, account manager, whose primary goal is supposed to be, servicing customers, but those vendors oftentimes need the same information that we have in our CRM system. So in their quote unquote, spare time, they go and enter, thousands of records and updates and whatnot. And so we took advantage of one of these bots to implement and allow that integration where API integrations weren't available. We took that integration, which freed that person up, which absolutely made them feel better about the job they were doing. And, a benefit of that too is now they have more time to service our customers. And I think that's true of folks on the event today too. This is all about not just making your business more efficient, but how can you serve their customers even better. And we also talked about earlier about low code development, and I want to just hit a couple things about that real quick while I had it, but probably a good time for another polling question around, where our audience does data entry. So that should be showing up here in just a second, and we'll let you go ahead and start working on that while I talk about low code. Low code, again, fancy term, low code, no code application, fancy term to really just say it's configuring applications or business solutions without the need for custom development or pulling on your, kind of senior level development staff. And I got to thinking about our audience a little bit again about this, and I'll kind of describe it this way to get there so they can get their arms around it. I kind of picture it as the Excel of the future, kind of picture it as Excel 2028, except it's available now. I think Excel probably was the original low code app. And, kind of what got me thinking about that was, why do people use Excel for so much stuff? It's because you need to manage things, track things, that kind of stuff, consolidate information. Would you love to do something cool with your technical team? Sure, no doubt. But is there ever time? Do you ever get on that priority list? That's probably not. So these low code, no code applications are kind of exactly that same concept, except much more robust and much more advanced functionality than Excel. And really you can put this in the hands where we often see it as kind of your good business analysts who know the business process, and then they can kind of configure these solutions. And so, I guess the last thought I'll have on that is when I talk about advanced or more robust capabilities, we're not just talking about tracking lists. We're talking about building contract management solutions, employee onboarding or compliance, or, things even like COVID or even IT ticketing systems, And again, much like Excel, pay a license once for a user, and then it doesn't matter how many things you put on that platform. So really, it's a pretty impactful proposition that we're, talking about that can fit into the size companies, any size company nowadays.
Yeah, thanks for bringing up that example, Mike. And I'll just continue to share that what I was extra excited about you being able to have one of our consultants automate that data entry and registration process is, one, Deanna, will love you forever because it reduced that from her workload. Two, the consultant did it in about an hour's time, and it cost about $10,000. So that is a very realistic example about a $10,000 investment that improved our operational efficiencies, brought much higher satisfaction for the employee who doesn't have to do that any longer. And, to your point, that time was then serving our clients, which is our ultimate goal. So the takeaway from here, again, is that these aren't futuristic. These are real life, more simplified solutions than they've ever been before, that really don't require a lot of time or expertise from a company's IT department also, which I find is very, very interesting. So thanks for that, Mike. Let's shift gears a bit. Andrew, when you introduced yourself, you mentioned in our software development team that we write custom applications. And I think, no offense to you or the entire software development team, but I think when you say software development, people just immediately think complex, hundreds of thousands of dollars of projects that take, months and years that you're just kind of slaves to over decades. So if you will, just spend a little bit more time talking about what some of these current technologies are allowing us to do for clients and how we can integrate or just connect their critical applications to provide a higher degree of automation, particularly within, finance teams and the like.
Sure. I think connecting systems via integration probably yields three benefits that come to mind. You get improved data quality and accuracy, increased efficiency and visibility across these systems by leveraging the ability to share data. And I think you can also gain improved insight into data and metrics, which are going to help you drive your business and your operational decisions. Now, if you think about that first category of improved data quality, one immediate problem that comes up when you have multiple systems is the need to enter data in multiple places more than once manually. And without an integration, that becomes a job of one person who probably has other responsibilities. It introduces a risk that mistakes are easy to make, but hard to discover down the road. And additionally, only the most necessary information is supplied, which means that other information that is in these sort of data silos or in these systems doesn't have an opportunity to become visible to other parts of the business. So integration and automation can kind of help address that problem area. First, when you integrate systems, you can enter data in one place and allow it to be distributed across multiple systems. Also, if you're not manually keying data, maybe you're already importing data from a file or something like that, still having it come to one place and then be distributed to multiple other systems, kind of be a single data source, is ideal. And then the benefit of that approach is that you get to reduce errors that are related to data quality and accuracy, which kind of have those downstream consequences that you probably don't discover till later. So for example, if you think about a contractor in a construction business, they need to be able to make purchasing decisions based on current inventory levels. And they need to be able to factor in the fact that inventory is being consumed daily on jobs, and that's happening pretty quickly. If you have an integration between these systems, you're going to give your finance team and your purchasing team the ability to have a more real-time insight into what current inventory levels are and what your needs might be as they're coming up, so that you can be a little more forward-looking in making those purchasing decisions, and ultimately facilitate that whole purchasing process and make sure vendors are getting paid on a timely basis as well. So having those types of systems integrated creates that opportunity to kind of streamline these processes and ultimately help scale your business. I also mentioned increased efficiency and visibility into your data. If you think about that contractor, without the ability to connect data from their operational system where these jobs are sort of taking place and being managed in the financial system, they're lacking that visibility into the state of inventory in this case. And in a fast-moving environment, they're going to miss out on opportunities to be more efficient in things like purchasing, project management. Things like that are ultimately going to hold their business back from being able to scale. They might impact projects directly. So some of our customers, and I'm going to talk about this later, operate in that environment, and they've developed manual approaches in the past that work. But we're hearing repeatedly that as they introduce more integration, it's allowing them greater visibility into their business and opening up that ability to be more forward-looking in their decision-making, just because they have these key data points more easily visible and available and updating in real time across the different systems. So most of us have manual processes. LBMC, we're not unique. We have our share of those. But we have made significant efforts to streamline the data flow between key systems in our organization. And that's kind of helped remove things like redundant data entry. It's helped us to develop repeatable processes as well. And that work all sits on top of or builds on top of integrations at its core. And then the last thing I kind of wanted to mention was integration does open up the ability to get greater insight into your data. So far, we've kind of talked about the issues that integration can address, but one of the key pieces that the integration outcome provides is visibility into data. And it may be that you already have some integration between those systems and are experiencing those benefits that I've already mentioned, and that's great. But if you don't have visibility into the data, even if it's integrated, you're still missing out. So, we all hear about dashboards. That's probably a key tool used to visualize data. And this is where integrations, I think, really provide a great benefit, because they give the ability to view data from numerous connected systems on a single dashboard, and they can provide actionable information for users across those various systems. So if we go back to that example of our contractor, an example dashboard might combine operational data such as job scheduling, job status, things like that, with data from the financial system such as job profitability and maybe purchasing related data. Now, the financial system may only provide profitability data at the time of job completion, or maybe even at the close of a month. And that leaves a huge information gap. And longer running jobs that might span multiple months, having the ability to view real-time job information and profitability information together can let you as a business adjust to patterns that you're seeing maybe on a given job or a certain type of job much sooner. So again, being more forward-looking. And being able to accomplish this type of thing requires that these systems be integrated. And it lets you go beyond basic reporting that exists in a lot of these different software packages that's sort of unique to that particular software package. And it lets you drill into data that's coming from multiple places in one dashboard in this case. And it's going to let you see kind of what's driving these outcomes in your business and help you be more forward-looking. So ultimately, I think integration is that mechanism that lets you connect these systems and to help you build these repeatable processes. And ultimately, it's going to let you benefit from increased visibility into that data that already exists in your organization today.
Your construction examples, Andrew, obviously can't be more timely because I don't know anybody that's in attendance that probably isn't struggling to get either a remodel project done or a light fixture, take delivery of that. But one of my favorite examples, and we're so lucky to deal with a lot of different customers across a lot of industries, is we have a very large church out of Dallas. Literally, the church takes up 2 complete city blocks. Andrew, you'll know who I'm talking about. But I loved it after we helped them with an integration between the congregation management system they use at the church and then their finance system. I remember being on site in Dallas and talking to their director of finance. And she's like, we blew the board away when we showed on our dashboard that we spend $5,000 buying donuts every week for the youth group. So I thought that was a great example of, just to your point, having that visibility and being able to make good decisions. So let's go ahead and have our final polling question, just to get an idea of how visible the data is within your organizations, and how many of you are using dashboards or more traditional reports and that type of thing. And as you're answering that question, I think what we want to do now is just get some additional real life kind of examples. So Andrew, you want to expand on a couple of your examples a little bit more?
Sure. I've kind of generally used that contractor example a few times, and that comes from some experiences we've had with many of our clients. One of these clients in particular operates a large fire safety business that spans multiple states. They've got satellite offices and warehouses scattered throughout this region of the country. So if you think about the sprinklers that you have in your office, those were likely installed by a contractor similar to this particular client. Their business involves installation and recurring maintenance and inspection, which is an important thing to keep in mind in a minute. They service hundreds of buildings in a given week, again, geographically dispersed. They've got technicians on site throughout the various states they operate in. And each of these technicians is responsible for a van that's holding inventory that might be consumed on any job that they visit that day. So a popular system that exists in this industry is something called Service Trade. Service Trade is an operational system for these types of contractors. And it's where most of the change is happening in terms of data about jobs, customers, even the start of the purchasing and billing process originates out of Service Trade. But Service Trade isn't a financial system on its own. So for this client and other similar ones, we've integrated Service Trade with their financial system, Sage Intacct. And some of the challenges prior to that this client faced was some of the things I mentioned, like a lack of insight into current inventory and valuation, little visibility into profitability of particularly longer running jobs that are typical in new construction, lack of visibility for the sales team into job history, trends for customers, even in some cases, recurring maintenance and inspection schedules, a lot of manual data entry and purchasing particularly, and even struggling sometimes with billing larger clients due to something as simple as just getting the correct billing contact information on the invoice. So many of those challenges are a result of these data silos that existed in really 3 key systems for this particular client. By integrating these systems together, we gave them a few things. That one, the ability to provide near real-time inventory levels and cost information to Intacct, so the financial package. The ability to automate a lot of the purchasing process by integrating Service Trade and Intacct. And this allowed technicians who are on site to actually on site open a PO request in the system they operate in, which is Service Trade, on a tablet, have those requests go through an approval process. And ultimately, when goods are received, Intacct gets notified about that and related cost information. AP bills can be prepared and the purchasing process can be completed, and we can make sure that vendors get paid. All of that's happening because of integration. And the client can now more accurately answer questions about inventory levels and particularly valuation, both of raw inventory and specific inventory items that are allocated for those long-running construction jobs that might be on order, still sitting on the shelf. So that was basically a best guess in the past for them. Mm-hmm. And now they're able to get a more accurate picture of that financially speaking. So in this case too, the integration brought in the CRM system, Salesforce, which is something I haven't mentioned yet. And that forms a nice loop of information flowing between the sales team, the operational team, and the financial team. So one issue that this client faced was certain large customers had these very specific billing needs that fell outside of the normal process that this client had. And the challenge sometimes was that client, that large client of theirs, would regularly have billing information changing week to week, month to month. And it was hard to keep the financial team apprised of that, so that they were winding up having to do a lot of manual data entry to correct invoices and get the right contact information out so they can get the bills out and get paid. But by integrating their CRM system, Salesforce, with both ServiceTrade and Intacct, that sales team now, who's touching the customer most regularly, can manage that customer and contact information in Salesforce. That kind of becomes a system of record. And then that data can be fed to ServiceTrade, where a technician who might be on site at a job can create the job record right there with the correct contact information, not having to re-enter it because it's coming from Salesforce. They can do that in ServiceTrade. When the job's completed, it's ready to invoice. That information flows over to Intacct. And ultimately, the invoice that goes out the door from Intacct has the right contact information on it, even in those unique scenarios. So the sales team now has this visibility into information coming out of ServiceTrade as well regarding things like that regular maintenance and inspection schedule. They're able to take these events where the technician is going out and inspecting like a sprinkler system for safety checks. And now they're able to make that it's a natural touch point already with the client. But as a result of this integration, the salespeople are actually able to prepare in advance for that touch point with the client based on the history for anything, from job data to financial data and things like that. All of that they're able to prepare to prior to meeting with the client. So that gives them an opportunity to do things like upsell in some scenarios. Generally speaking, though, they can be more proactive in their communication with the client throughout their relationship with them. So really, by integrating those three key systems, this particular client was able to remove these information silos and evolve their processes to be more forward-looking and provide a platform ultimately that's going to help them scale their business further.
Thanks, Andrew. That was a pretty comprehensive example, but really great kind of how, to your point, it's a loop of information. And again, getting back to the advantages of integration and having that one version of the truth. I want to be cognizant of your time, but I do want to share that it sounds like that topic really resonated with folks, because really there only seems to be about 14% of the attendees that responded that they really use dashboards on a regular basis or KPIs. Many are thinking about it and looking into it. So that might be something that warrants a whole separate session at one point. Kenneth, since we do have a large audience of financial executives in attendance today, and given COVID and the fact that what we saw, March of 2020, when we all kind of shut down, a lot of our finance clients, were still printing checks. They were doing a lot of things on paper and manually. Can you quickly give us an example of some of that automation from the finance team and what we're seeing in those trends?
Yeah, I think the largest area we're seeing trends, especially the last couple of years, is really in the areas of AP automation and AR automation. It used to be that it would rarely come up, and almost every opportunity we work with a client, it's number one on their list is to talk about AP automation or AR automation or something in those areas. So we service a lot of healthcare companies is a pretty good example for us. These healthcare companies typically are looking to verticalize certain elements of the healthcare service industry, where they were going to have locations across, a geographic area across the United States. And they're going to want to be able to funnel and centralize all those core business operations in a central location and bring all that data together. And certainly AP automation is a great tool to make that happen. And Mike has a practice around AP automation where we're able to do quite a bit with our clients in that space, as well as other software publishers that we work with from time to time across the demographics of the different type of clients that we service. But that's probably the biggest area. And certainly with COVID, those folks that were printing checks, in some cases, they couldn't get to their office.
Right.
Because they would close them down.
Yeah.
And realized that that reliance on that paper was maybe not such a good thing. So it certainly pushed those that weren't quite there yet over the edge about talking more about how they could better automate, some of those more standard functions they kind of take for granted that they're always able to be in the office together to take care of. And AP was certainly one of those. On the AR side, the same thing's true. How do I work with my clients and provide solutions from an automation standpoint that help us collaborate better together in that business relationship of getting payments made? And how can we do that in an electronic way? And in some cases, even a bank-to-bank type transaction that totally takes, the person out of the mix together, right? When you're able to form a banking relationship where data is transferred on a regular basis based upon the invoices that are flowing in the system. So that's probably the biggest area that we've really seen a lot of activity in the last few years. On the revenue side itself, I have some personal examples related to how we've been able to use, again, some AI functions that Sage Intacct has provided. So we personally, as a user of the Sage Intacct solution, as well as of our clients that need to enter time either for billing purposes or to even just for labor costing purposes. Revenue leakage is a really big area for companies that are billing for their time. And Intelligent Time is actually, again, an AI tool that sits there on your desktop and it evaluates in an automated way all the activity on your computer, whether it's from Outlook, whether it's from the fact that you have Excel open for a certain period of time or Microsoft Word or whatever. And it can actually propose the data entry you need to make relative to your time, not only to propose it, for you to actually drag it over to your timesheet, and it will begin to populate out some of your time. So just some primary areas we're seeing a lot of growth in right now from an automation standpoint.
Yeah, and any person who's had to key in time every day of the week for their professional career loves that type of functionality becoming available. We do have a good number of questions, and we're down to 4 minutes of our session. So, Mike, I'm just kind of been reviewing a couple of these questions. I'm going to address one to you that I think is somewhat generic, but may be on the minds of a lot of our audience. The question is, it looks like there are a lot of tools that can cover a lot of areas. Do you have thoughts on what makes sense organizationally to prioritize? And do you have experience with things like steering committees, examples to help companies prioritize their needs?
Yeah, I guess I've got two thoughts on that, Stacy, and just probably go back in my history. I was actually over IT for a med-mal insurance carrier, and we did a lot of this. I mean, we've covered a lot of territory today. I mean, I can't imagine it's not overwhelming. So everything starts with just a conversation, first of all, with us, with those on the fact, that's where we always start. What are the needs? And then you align the technology to what your needs or challenges are. But steering committees, I think, are very effective, not just in what's going on now or what's next, but even looking out 4 or 5 years, where do you want to be? Because you can start to build these, one of our solutions is OnBase, but, I always talk, that's not a 3-month implementation. That's a 20-year investment that you're looking. You hope to do efficiencies and continue to take advantage of those tools that you have for the foreseeable future. So yeah, and I would say also make sure you've got a good partnership with leadership on IT and on the business. It takes both sides to drive the business. So that's just quick thoughts.
Yeah, I think one thing I would interject, and you just touched on, Mike, that I think we've seen, and again, using your term, Kenneth, it might be really revolutionary is, if you go back 10 years ago, oftentimes, even if we are talking to a client about their financial needs, there's a director of IT and that sort of thing almost involved in all of these conversations. I think that's been very, very, that's evolved over the last several years, and that these are really solutions focused on either an individual business unit or, focus for the operational manager. So this is not just an IT conversation by any means. It really just starts with the conversation of what your business goals and objectives are. So Gloria is actually throwing up a QR code on the screen, and I apologize we haven't gotten time to get to everyone's questions. We will absolutely address those, but feel free, this QR, just our way of showing a little bit more of current technology. You can just let us know what your questions are. If you have additional questions, we'll keep track of the ones you've already posted. And we would love the opportunity just to clarify anything that we've talked about, or to have a conversation more specific to your organization. So thank you so much for joining us today. Don't forget, we were really just the warm-up band to, the next session or with the governor, and we hope you have a great afternoon and that Catalyst was a real value for you today. Thank you.